and the judges will introduce themselves.
Excellent. So welcome Unit 3. I am Francine Engel. I am from the state of Maryland. I am a political scientist and I specialize in American constitutional development. And I currently work with the Maryland Council for Civic and History Education.
I guess I'm next. My name is Jocelyn Broman. I work in Congress, so I work for Representative Don Young of Alaska, and I have worked there for about 5 years. I'm also a We the People alum. I competed at nationals in 2006, which was a very long time ago, which also eventually led to me going to law school. So I'm also an attorney. Looking forward to it, guys.
My name is Evan Gessner. I'm an attorney in Lexington, South Carolina, where I handle some civil rights claims and a whole bunch of tort and personal injury property damage actions. This is my first year judging at the national level, though I've judged state We the People competitions for probably 12 or 13 years now. So I'm excited to be here and really excited to hear what you have to say.
All right. Can you introduce yourselves, please?
Hi, I'm Pratham Soni.
Hi, I'm Abby Chan.
And my name is Seth Sarublisser.
Excellent.
And I'm Coach. I'm the coach.
Thank you. All right, so we'll go ahead and read the question. So we have a quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes. It says, quote, "I do not think the United States would come to an end if we lost our power to declare an act of Congress void. I do think the Union would be imperiled if we could not make the declaration as to the laws of the several states." End quote. What impact has judicial review had on federalism? Is judicial review a counter-majoritarian practice? Please support your position. What limits, if any, would you place on the practice of judicial review? You may begin.
The power of the federal government relative to the states has generally increased over time as a result of judicial review. Since at least the early 19th century, the judiciary branch has played a major part in both the political and legal system, imposing constraints on the power of both the states and other two branches of the federal government. As Oliver Wendell Holmes noted in his speech, the Harvard Law Association of New York, judicial review has been an integral part of the U.S. judicial and legislative branches. The U.S. Supreme Court's Marbury versus Madison established the principle of judicial review, the power of the federal court cases to declare legislative and executive acts unconstitutional. However, in total, the Supreme Court's successes in curbing the state autonomy has greatly exceeded their more limited efforts to constrain local federal power, demonstrating a profound impact on federalism. For example, decisions in the Supreme Court case McCulloch versus Maryland both negated state laws which interfered with interstate commercial enterprises and therefore upholding federal laws. Judicial review regarding state laws in the 19th and 20th centuries recognized to have invalidated many state economic regulations, and the period of time was referred to as the Lochner area, named after the Supreme Court case Lochner versus New York. Furthermore, in Brown versus the Board of Education, the Supreme Court engaged in a major judicial effort to restrict discriminatory practices by state governments. In the 20 years following the Brown decision, the Supreme Court, in numerous lower cases, issued decisions that struck down state discrimination against minorities.
Since the 1930s, federal courts have avoided imposing severe constraints on the power of the federal government, largely due to structural limitations. Because federal judges and justices are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate, a Supreme Court majority that deviates significantly from the preferences of the federal government and its political branches is less common. If the court diverges substantially from the views of the federal government, it can be balanced by new judicial appointments. Moreover, the judiciary depends on the executive branch to enforce their decisions, so they are careful to avoid offending the national political branches. Some may consider the practice of judicial review to be counter to majoritarianism. Majoritarianism is based on the idea that a majority is entitled to the government primacy. Those that argue that judicial review is counter-majoritarian often cite that it is largely anti-democratic because federal judges are not elective and serve like terms. Although some argue that democratically elected leaders appoint judges, making judges somewhat democratically elected, some judges have no responsibility to uphold the beliefs of the majority of opinion in the U.S. Additionally, federal judges often do not face as many political risks by practicing judicial review. While the Supreme Court historically has higher approval ratings than other branches, too many unpopular decisions may result in eroding support from the public. On the contrary, some might argue that judicial review is majoritarian due to the judicial system's respect of precedent. For example, stare decisis is a precedent that directs judges to remain cautious when thinking to overturn previous decisions by the court.
To counter the approach that justices may face political risks is the fact that judicial autonomy is reinforced as a result of extensive political ignorance in the United States. Because voters are often unaware of the majority of Supreme Court decisions, such political ignorance can drive justices to strike down popular legislation without suffering major political consequences. With this in mind, I do not believe that any limitation should be placed on the practices of judicial review. Constitutional changes more often come as a result of changing interpretations of the Constitution rather than the formal amendment process. Furthermore, the system of checks and balances ensures that no one branch may exercise too much power. Presidents have a lasting impact on the judicial branch by employing their ability to appoint federal judges who serve life terms. While this is an uncommon practice, presidents can also choose to ignore a court decision completely. This approach can be used by presidents in the past by following unpopular decisions. Limitations can be placed by passing legislation that changes court's jurisdiction, modifies the impact of decision after it has been made, or by amending Constitution. Judicial review is also a part of the system of checks and balances.
Excellent. All right, so one of the things that you brought up a couple times in your statement is the power of judicial review. It's only as powerful as other branches are willing to enforce the decision. Can you think of any examples where a president or Congress or even the American people just have refused to comply with a Supreme Court decision?
Okay, so one example that we would cite is the Roe versus Wade decision. So Roe versus Wade established that a woman has a right to abortion because it's her own privacy. But more recently, we've seen a lot of opposition to the Roe versus Wade. For example, in Alabama, many of the laws created by their legislator limit the extent to which an abortion can be made, and some of them only allow abortion if it's like non-consensual sex. So we'd say that there are lots of ways in which we've seen the Supreme Court rulings being denied by either like local governments or the national government as a whole.
I would also argue that historically we've seen like laws such as like segregation be implemented, but after things like in the 1960s, after the Civil Rights Act and many civil rights acts were implemented, we still saw segregation in schools, and many people and many school districts that were public as well just decided not to go along with the process of like allowing like everyone into the school and further the practice of like allowing only white people and white children into their schools.
And furthermore, in more recent times, we've seen with the recent Supreme Court rulings that established that gay marriages were legal within the United States, we've seen that multiple states still haven't signed on to that and have allowed the practice of gay marriage to continue within their state specifically. So just recently, we've seen that about 40 states have implemented it, but the other 10 states have not in the past recent years, given that the Supreme Court case has allowed it and deems it legal within all 50 states.
Let's move. I think from your statement, I kind of got the sense that that the counter-majoritarian nature of the court is mostly a good thing at the very least. Do you think it's still a good thing given how partisan the judicial nominations and judicial confirmation process has become between the president and the U.S. Senate?
I'd argue in some ways that it has become less counter-majoritarian because we can see but in this election, more specifically in the 2020 election, we saw Amy Coney Barrett get nominated almost a couple weeks before the election was there. And we see that in this process, we've seen like how the president just allowed in Senate and Senate Republicans have gone by partisan lines and just pushed for a nominee for the judicial branch and a justice, and didn't allow the American people to have a vote or have a say in who the justice should be.
But the Constitution doesn't give the American people the ability to choose a justice, does it?
I would argue that with the idea of allowing representatives and electing representatives, they give that vote and electing the president. They also give the American people the ability to nominate a justice indirectly, because once you're given the ability to nominate the people, you're also given the ability to nominate who those people nominate. And we saw that because like just a couple weeks before the election, the American people weren't able to cast who the justice should be by voting on who they think their representative should be. They allowed it was counter majoritarian and went on partisan lines.
I would say that given the height of social media and currently where we're at, I would say that the public has a very strong opinion on certain nominations. And for example, the public was able to voice their opinion in favor or opposing Amy Coney Barrett and her recent nomination. So we saw a lot of people took to the streets to protest, or even there was a lot of Instagram filled ads talking about her and her Supreme Court nomination. So the public was heavily involved and was able to voice their concerns, even though they weren't specifically voting on whether to nominate her for the court or for not.
And to add to that, I'd say that this just proves the counter-majoritarian nature of the court, because even though there's a lot of public backlash because of like Supreme Court decisions or elections to the Supreme Court doesn't have any, like the public isn't entitled to change the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court acts completely independently and makes their own decisions without, like we said in our 4-minute speech, any political risk. So in that way, we'd say that the Supreme Court maybe is becoming more counter-majoritarian in the status quo because of the politicized nature of court rulings.
So is that a good thing? Or should we start limiting the court?
I'd say that it's probably not the best thing. I don't know how we would exactly limit the court, but if there's some way to make the court less politicized and like reflect less of the court, the justices' biases, then that would be overall a net good thing for the United States.
Kind of adding on to Sev's previous point, we've seen that President Joe Biden has kind of thought about expanding the court, and that would help with further politicizing it, seeing how if you have a majority or more people on a court, it leaves less room for those super narrow majorities to win and preside over court cases. So if President Joe Biden was able to follow through and essentially have and create a bigger Supreme Court, we would see that happening in the future.
Okay, great.
Now, apparently, I didn't know this until I got my judging materials because I hadn't read his book. But Senator Ted Cruz wrote in his book, One Vote Away, he says that a single Supreme Court seat can change history. Do you agree with that or not? Kind of curious to hear what you have to say about that.
I would agree with that statement, because we've seen that in times where there's there's a 4-4 split, and then there's one more conservative judge or one more liberal judge that needs to be implemented, there can be a 4-5 split in Congress, and that would mean, or in the judicial branch, which would make it like extremely hard for like, or it'd make it extremely valuable for that like 9th seat, especially because we've like seen in the past how like there's laws that have been implemented on a 5-4 split. And because of that, we've seen that like it's changed history, right? We've seen like court cases that have done that.
And to add to that, I'd say that most Supreme Court rulings aren't a 5-4 split. The ones that are highly politicized and do impact a lot of people usually are the 5-4 split, because the court is usually either like 5 Democrats or 5 Republicans, and the rest are the opposite. So, and that's also interesting in this, and right now, because now the court has more Republicans than Democrats, or like more than 5 Republicans in the court. So it's like that extra person will change history in a very impactful way.
I would like to counter argue my friends, I guess, seeing how there have been decisions that's made by that slim majority, but seeing how there have been lower court cases to challenge the Supreme Court and like different rulings following that, we've seen that the ability, because of judicial review and because of our current court system, they have the ability to have future legislation passed. Okay.
Thank you.
Great job, guys.
All right. Let's all give the students a round of applause for their hard work and participation today.
Excellent. So
Yeah, now I'll open it up for judge feedback.
yes, yeah. So thank you very much for your presentation. And again, you had a lot of good court cases in your presentation as well. And I really like that you brought up the idea of precedent and stare decisis and how that is important. I really liked that in your questioning that you sometimes disagreed with each other and you offered counter arguments. So that was good to kind of get different points of view out there. One thing that I wished, like in your explanation in our follow-up questions, that I had a little bit more explanation in terms of counter-majoritarianism. So you were talking about Barrett was kind of, you saw it as counter-majoritarian because the people didn't have a chance to vote, and that kind of happened about 2 weeks before the election. And I'm wondering, where do you draw that line? Okay, because before that, when Obama was president, you had Merrick Garland's nomination, and that was almost a year before the confirmation process. So, I mean, how do you decide when that is? I mean, usually, the way we've typically understood it is if you're president at the time and the nomination comes up, you are free to nominate somebody. So I guess I'm just a little bit, I'd like to hear, if I had more time with the follow-up question, I'd like to maybe hear a little bit more about that in terms of where do you draw the line there. But excellent presentation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, very good presentation. And I was kind of trying to get after you guys. You guys did a great job when I was like, but what about this? But what about that? And you were doing very well and supporting each other. And that's always great to see. And so I just want to commend you for that. I want to echo Francine with the stare decisis and how your statement made that first statement of like federal power increased over states. Like that's exactly like what we're kind of looking for. And I know I was glad to hear it like just explained very clearly. One thing I will say is that when we're talking about like judges and partisanship and all of that, like it kind of brings up this question of like, if it's such a partisan process to get someone on the Supreme Court now, and we've seen this happen over the past, I want to say now 5-6-ish years, like we've seen every single Supreme Court nomination has been just partisan, whether it's Merrick Garland, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, like it's all partisan at this point. And it's very obvious. So what does that mean in terms of how those justices are going to decide things? And I'd like to see a little bit more nuance between the differences between once they get on the court versus what does that confirmation process looks like. So just keep that in mind that, for example, Justice Gorsuch ruled with the 4 quote unquote more liberal justices in terms of McGirt versus Oklahoma, which is a huge Indian law case and basically puts Oklahoma basically saying that this reservation was not, Congress didn't take the reservation away, so this has jurisdictional issues now. I don't know how many him to vote that way. So for that court decision. So make sure, like, as you're talking about what does it mean to be what partisanship does on the court, like how does that actually affect rulings? Because we also saw this with the Obamacare case with Chief Justice John Roberts, appointed by a Republican president. He was expected to rule a certain way, and he didn't. He joined the 5-4 majority, upholding the statute. So just keep that in mind as you guys are looking at it as well. But overall, very good discussion, and I appreciated all your examples as well. I will also mention, you guys were talking a little bit fast for your statement, so I'm like trying to write down as well. So just as like a aside, because if I don't hear everything that you say, I want to make sure that I hear everything so that I know the depth of your understanding. It's very obvious that you all have studied this very well and we want to hear all of it. So I just want to make sure that as you guys are going forward, just make sure that we can hear everything that you're reading and saying during your statement as well. Just want to make that point. So because we want to hear all of it. So we just want to make sure that we can.
You did have about 10 seconds to spare on your opening statement, so you do have a little room if you want to slow down a little.
Thanks, John. Yeah, everyone, great job. I really enjoyed your presentation. I can tell you all put a lot of hard work and a lot of thought into this. It was well thought out. You had great examples. I like, asking about that one vote making a difference, and I putting all three of you together, I think you agreed that yes, it does, but it's not always such a big issue, because you said, most cases are not a 5-4 split, and I think that's talking about a political ideology and partisanship, and that does rear its ugly head from time to time. But I can tell you, as a practicing attorney, by and large, right is right and wrong is wrong. And most judges, regardless of their political affiliation, are most of the time going to rule in the interest of justice. You're not going to see a huge difference. The only thing I would add, as far as whether or not that single seat changes history, I think, having been something, I think all lawyers consider themselves somewhat of a legal scholar on some level, because we read all these cases, and so we're studying history. And I think that one seat might make a difference there that day in that specific case. But as time marches on, overall, our country's changed, and things change. And I think a lot of times these changes will happen. So I think it might be a 5-4 case that shuts something down, but over time, it's probably not going to stay that way forever. So that's the only thing I would add to that. But all in all, really great job. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent presentation to all of you.
Thank you very much.